Hi, everyone. This is Scott Wallace from the Boston Garden Balcony blog, the #1 place on the web for WWF 1980s wrestling and memories of some of the great matches from the old Boston Garden. In just a few weeks, we'll hit the date of March 29th, 2012, which will be the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania III. To talk about this event with us, I'm happy to welcome Dave Meltzer, the publisher and editor of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Thanks very much, Dave, for being with us today.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure.
So I've seen all of the WrestleManias, and I'll be watching John Cena fight The Rock this year. But to me, at least, I still think WrestleMania III is the best Mania ever, and I realize I may be a bit nostalgic about that. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, where do you think WrestleMania III ranks in terms of importance?
Pretty high in terms of importance. I wouldn't think. I think that the modern WrestleManias, not last year, but a lot of the ones in recent years kind of are blow it away just because of the mentality is completely changed. The wrestlers who are in WrestleMania now grew up with the idea that WrestleMania is like the big, like a larger-than-life event. And it took a generation for that to happen. The wrestlers who were in, like, WrestleMania III, you know, it was like a big show, but they'd been in big shows before, and it had the meaning to the wrestlers. It was more, well, I'll get paid more than any other show, but it was nothing compared to the meaning to the guys now, and it's not like that they peaked their training for the WrestleMania back then, or they you know, had it in their mind that they were out there to steal the show or have the best match on the show, which a lot of guys that are given the opportunity now will have. You know, I mean, at WrestleMania III, which was a good show, Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat was a great match, you know, no doubt. It was the best match of the first, 10, 12, 13 WrestleManias. But aside from that, I don't think there was any match that was really anything special, you know, I mean, as far as, blow away match. It's not like some of the shows where you have 5, 6 matches that are like really, really good. This didn't have that at all. But I think WrestleMania 1 still is the most important, because if the promotion of WrestleMania didn't work, WrestleMania 1 didn't work, there wouldn't have been a WrestleMania 2. And WrestleMania 3 was pretty important. I think in hindsight, the WrestleMania with Mike Tyson, WrestleMania 13, only because of the Steve Austin babyface turn, was not a well bought WrestleMania, but historically I think it's important. I think the one with Mike Tyson was really important because that turned WrestleMania from like a 300,000 buys to 700,000 buys, and the level that's been there. And then the one in 2001 with Rock and Austin, I think was huge. The Trump one obviously was the biggest, but I don't think historically is the biggest, even though it made the most money. But so those would be like the big ones. 1, 3, 13, 17 was real big, and then what's the other one? Maybe 14. So to me, those are probably the most important.
You had mentioned, of course, Savage and Steamboat from WrestleMania III, and there have been lots of other great in-ring matches since then at WrestleMania. So, why do you think that Savage and Steamboat sticks with people all these years later?
Because there weren't as many of that caliber, so they didn't blur together. I mean, when you, like I said, like when you talk about until the really, to me, the Bret Hart Austin match, which was in 1997 or 96, 97. Okay, until that match, I don't think that there was a WrestleMania match that really could compare with Savage and Steamboat. I think, some might say Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, but I wouldn't agree with that. Especially having been to that one live. And it was a good match, but I wouldn't put it at the same level. So you're talking about something that was from 1987 to 1997 was clearly the greatest match in WrestleMania history. Then from there, there's a lot of matches since 1997 in the last 14, 15 years that have been really, really good, but they don't stand out because there were, those shows had other good matches. So I think that's why, and plus it was the first match at a WrestleMania that was the equivalent to a great NWA match, honestly, which WWF, I don't want to say they never had, but they never had at WrestleMania until, again, the Bret Hart Steve Austin match.
Totally agree with that, with the NWA comparison there. Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant fought in the main event at Mania 3, and the work in the match pretty much sucked. But for me, I see the replay and I see the crowd explode when Hogan slams Andre, and it still kind of gives me kind of chills to watch it. What do you think The Rock and John Cena need to do this year at WrestleMania 28 to get the crowd into their match to that degree?
Well, it's almost impossible because you're talking about a different era, and you got to remember that you had two guys larger than life who had been protected forever. I mean, Hogan, when he came back in the end of '83, and this is already now early '87, had not lost one match by pin, submission, anything like that. Andre, nobody had ever seen lose. He'd lost in foreign countries, or he lost, in the '70s, at a house show here and there to the Sheik or something that no one even remembers, or almost nobody was aware of. So as far as most people who were around, Andre had been 15 years unbeaten, and Hogan had been 4 years unbeaten. So it'd be like, that was like Ali Frazier. Like with John Cena losing on several pay-per-views each year, and The Rock being an actor coming back. You that thing where you had two guys where nobody could perceive either losing. You can't, So the pinfall, was big. You had the body slam thing that had been really well built up. When was the last time? I'm trying to remember the last time anyone had seen Andre slammed. Hogan did it in the territory 7 years earlier, 1980, when they did the Hogan Andre. I think. So you're talking about a large percentage of that fan base had no idea that ever happened. In fact, and I'm sure you remember when they built up the Hogan Andre match. Part of the build of that match was pretending that that whole 1980s period never existed. This was the first time they'd ever wrestled, and things like that. So nobody'd seen Andre slam, nobody'd ever seen Andre beaten. So it was like the culmination of a giant long story. So you can't do that. That's one of the reasons why that match is so well remembered, because the circumstances leading up to that match were something that it will probably never be duplicated, because guys don't go undefeated in the main events for 4 years, because it just doesn't happen.
Okay, finally, last question here. The often mentioned attendance at WrestleMania III was 93,173. They really hammered that number down for years. However, you reported in the Observer many years back that you had learned that the real attendance was closer to 78,000 or so. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I remember, it's funny because at that time in '87, I was getting all the gates of all the WWE shows from WWE, and they would say like blah 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 blah, and they gave me the gate of $1,599,000, and then they said like what was the real attendance, and I just remember it's funny because they just said there were 2,300 freebies, but I was never actually told 93,173, and it was sort of like I go, well, what was the real number? And it was just kind of like the subject was changed. So I just figured, 93,173 was probably the real number. Nobody else had ever questioned it. It wasn't like anybody came out with like now every year at WrestleMania, they announce a number, and then 6 weeks later I get the real number, and it's, it's 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 different. They just, they make up the number to have the record for the building, even though usually they don't have the record for the building because they got the big stage. So it's not, you actually can get, even though you don't have seats on the floor at a football game, you actually can get more people for a football game than you can for a WrestleMania. And then if you have like a Final Four or something like that in some of these indoor stadiums where you don't have the big screens and everything, you draw far more people. So, but the point is that, at that time I didn't know, and it really wasn't until, God, I don't know, 7-8 years later, I remember this. There had been I don't know if it was E or somebody did a True Hollywood story on Hulk Hogan, and Hogan's out there talking about 93,000, and I got a phone call like I'm watching the show from Zane Bresloff, who was promoted that show, and he just goes, God, it's like, and he and Hogan were tight, and they were good friends, and he's just going like, God, Hogan probably already believes that number, and I go, isn't that the real number? He goes, no, of course not, none of it, because when I was getting numbers from WWE. The numbers, even for the indoor WrestleManias, the numbers that they have on their computer and the numbers that they announce were always different. But in '87, as I told you, they kind of like in the conversation, I think that one of the things they didn't want me to know that number, so they didn't tell me that number. So that was the first time. I don't know, it's like 7-8 years later, because Hogan was already in WCW by then, so it's probably '95. I'm thinking when this maybe '94, '95, '96. And he just goes, no, the real number's 78,000. And I go, really? He goes, yeah, we made up 93,000 because the whatever it was, the Rolling Stones or something had drawn like 87,000, and or the Pope or something like that. Maybe the Rolling Stones was after, but they knew it was coming. But there was the Pope and the Rolling Stones in them, and they created a number that neither of those groups could have, that nobody could have because you couldn't get that many people in the building. So it was a number that was created before the show ever started, and it was a number. I mean, they did sell out. I mean, the sellout was real. And I mean, the truth of the matter is that if the building was big enough to where they could put 93,000 in, they really would have. But you could say that about a lot of WrestleManias. The one of all the WrestleManias, the one that would have put the most people in the building was the one at the Astrodome with Rock and Austin, because that one, they sold out every ticket as soon as they put tickets on sale. Whereas this WrestleMania, you know, they might have sold 20,000 tickets the first week at the Pontiac Silverdome, whereas the WrestleMania with Rock and Austin, you know, they sold like, I don't know what it was, like maybe 50,000 tickets the first day. I mean, you can't even compare the two. I mean, that one would have sold the most, but it was but the Astrodome was smaller than the Silverdome, so they didn't get as many people in. But anyway, so that was the gist. And since then, you know, I mean, I've talked to, you know, many people there, and you know, I talked to Vince about it once, and it was just like, you know, the numbers that he would say, the numbers that we give you are the real numbers, and the numbers that we say on television are for entertainment purposes only, and that was the answer. So it's for entertainment purposes only. It's that number, so they could, you know, claim the record for, you know, that for a long time they would claim like largest indoors, you know, whatever, a largest indoor sports crowd in the history of the world or something. You know, so, you know, they claimed that for a while and everything. So, yeah, but that was the story behind that. But, I mean, you know, the fact is, like I said, you know, they probably could have got, I don't know how many people, maybe 100,000 there. They probably could have gotten 120,000 maybe for the Austin match. But who knows? No one really knows, because they filled up the stadium. That's all you can say. And how many extra they would have gotten, who you know, no one really knows.
Well, I think WrestleMania 28 has the potential to be memorable with The Rock and Cena, so we'll see how it compares after to WrestleMania 3 and some of the other great shows of the past. Dave, thank you so much for your thoughts, and I hope the Observer keeps going strong.
Thank you very much.